Episode 2, Revenant. It's over. Let's talk about it. Story. The story this season revolved around our Eliksni friends, Misrax, Aramis, Ido, to a lesser extent, Varix. Fikrul, the big bad for the episode, has obtained the Echo and is able to turn alive Eliksni into scorn, usually a feat that requires them to be dead first. Fikrul is attacking Aramis's house. They're fleeing Europa, so we head there and bring in Aramis despite and because of all of the stupid stuff that she has done to us. We strike a deal to bring her in while giving her people safe passage to the city, but the helm is attacked by Fikrul and it goes down in another section of the city. We meet up with Ido and Misrax, start talking about tonics that could potentially make Misrax better, as he's currently dealing with old Nezarek sucking the life out of him and deteriorating him, turning him into just some primal, twisted creature thing. Varix is here too, talking about his own pursuits of power and some of the mistakes he's made in the past. Aramis slowly opens up to the idea of you actually wanting to help her, sending you to the old Gambit map where you end up finding Fikrul. Fikrul thinks Crow is still Uldren, so he talks to him like that, and Crow rolls like a 2 on a D20 persuasion check when talking to him, so we have to bail while saving some captured Eliksni. That's Act 1. Act 2 starts with us hitting up the Tomb of Elders. Scorn have broken in, we're trying to save more Eliksni, so we do that in addition to hunting down any kind of tech that could help Ido in her quest for new tonics. During this time, Ido has it in her head that we need to free Aramis. Ido has not made a ton of progress developing new tonics, and Aramis knows a lot of stuff that could help her. We also failed to find Fikrul in the Tomb of Elders, and he is doing some kind of sussy stuff. And then eventually we do find him, and he is indeed being sus, bringing back Skolas, along with giving us a pretty neat cutscene. We kill Skolas, but he immediately gets rezzed, and we're like, oh man, is this how it feels? This kind of sucks. And then we bail. Spider joins the conversation. He was probably around here earlier somewhere, I honestly don't remember, and he gives us an EMP to help break Aramis out of prison. She plans on going to a location that Ido has given her to help her out. That is Act 2. Act 3, we enter Kel's Fall, the exotic mission of the season, thanks to some info from Spider, and we kill off one of Fikrul's minions. Meanwhile, Aramis tells us that she has found some new information in our quest to heal Misrax, and that we need to get back into Fikrul's place. There is an apothecary who knows what we're looking for, and only this apothecary knows. So, back in we go to talk to them, and they end up helping out Ido. Ido then gives us a tonic that converts the ether in Fikrul, filling him with light, which will turn him back into an Eliksni for a short time. Then we need to kill him during that brief window of vulnerability, and so we stab him with a syringe, and he go bye-bye. The Echo then chooses Aramis instead of Misrax, but Aramis uses the power of the Echo to cleanse Misrax, restoring him to his normal self, although with Nezarek not completely gone. Misrax is now the Kel of Kells, as Aramis takes the Echo and heads back to Old Reese in an attempt to rebuild. Story was fine. I really don't have any feelings on it whatsoever, and I've been sitting here with my script for a while, trying to think of how I felt about it. It did not leave that much of an impression on me. Honestly, the biggest thing for me was that there was some real kind of conclusion. Fikrul's story is complete. I'm glad we don't need to hear about him anymore. Aramis can finally bail from this cast as well, although Bungie leaves the door slightly open in the future, I guess, if we ever want to go back to Old Reese or something like that, which I would be open to. I didn't think Misrax was going to die, although I felt like I saw some feedback saying that he should have. I personally didn't have any big stakes in these characters, maybe save for Misrax. Really, I cared more about seeing that relationship between Crow and Fikrul, but it feels like we only got to scrape the surface of it. Just kind of tired of these characters, personally. I'm ready for some new ones, or just for something new to happen. This episode also had Bungie dropping all of the story parts for each act all at once at the request of the community. As a result, the story tended to feel like a lot of running around talking to people, because I imagine Bungie built the story to be deployed week over week and simply got rid of the barriers in between the weeks. Had Bungie developed the story chain, the quest line, with this all-at-once style in mind, it maybe would have felt like a smoother experience. The feedback to this new all-at-once system has been about 50-50 in my eyes. Some people like it, some people don't. As someone a little more active on the game, I wouldn't mind going back to an every week style release. I personally don't care either way. Whatever they want to do, I'm not pulled in one way or the other. But I will say that having it in batches does make me forget what exactly happened due to the large gap between acts. Gameplay. We had Onslaught Salvation, we had Tomb of Elders, we had the exotic mission Kel's Fall, and then a short variant of Tomb of Elders with the Skolas encounter from Destiny 1, slightly updated for Destiny 2. I don't have much to say on Onslaught because we have already experienced this activity back with Into the Light. Part of the appeal of Onslaught during Into the Light was the fact that not only were there some of the most insane weapons we've ever seen dropping, but also a cosmetic shiny version of them as well. So every chest, every drop had potential to be a rare version that you can only see for that brief window of time. Yes, Bungie gave Onslaught some adjustments, they added a couple small things, we got some new maps, but the experience plays the same as it did with Into the Light, except the rewards weren't nearly as cracked and the cosmetic portion of the shiny drops were not on display. I think Onslaught could use an in-between version in terms of wave count. Onslaught 10 it's a bit short and easy, doesn't really allow for much other than just some mindless face rolling, but Onslaught 50 isn't nearly as appealing to run because the rewards from it weren't as strong as their Into the Light counterparts. It's an hour for a single run, and not even I am really that interested in an hour-long run. Something like Onslaught 30 would probably be a nice in-between for people ramping up in difficulty a bit faster, but without as long of a time commitment. I realize that this might split the population even more though, so without knowing population numbers in these activities, it's kind of hard to address that. Tomb of Elders revisits the Prison of Elders landscape, although the format wasn't exactly one-to-one compared to the Destiny 1 version. Warden's Favor builds as you complete the bonus objectives, leading to more difficulty in the run, scaling dynamically depending on how well you're doing. I didn't find anything really super wrong or bad about Tomb of Elders, but I wasn't really that motivated to run it outside of any episodic or triumph obligations. It's just yet another seasonal activity, episodic activity, with the same kind of objectives we're used to seeing in these kinds of activities. Okay, sure, maybe some slight differences than usual, but not that far off. Throw a ball at a thing, collect some things on the ground, flip some switches on a floor. It's all just a variation of a variation. Kel's Fall was the exotic mission, featuring the shotgun Slayer's Fang, a weapon I keep calling Slayer's Bane for some reason. Kel's Fall, much like the Episode 1 exotic mission, I think starts a neat idea or concept, and then just never really pushes it beyond the basics. I've gotten into some conversations about what exotic missions have become over the years, especially since we're getting one every episode. The faster that Bungie needs to crank these missions out, the less time they really get into making them something really significant or deep. Plus the fact that since they're part of a story campaign for the episode, Bungie can't really make them too hard for the casual audience. Not only that, but they seek to make them replayable, although it's more of a forced replayability, if anything. This is in complete contrast to earlier missions like Whisper and 0 Hour, which were much more difficult and came around less often, but were much more memorable experiences. These episodic one-offs don't really feel like exotic missions so much as they feel like a mission that you get an exotic weapon from when you're done. Also, Act 3's conclusion was, yet again, run the mission a whole bunch of times, but I think, one, people were expecting this, and two, the mission didn't feel as long to run, so it might have been deemed a little more acceptable. The updated Skolas encounter was a nice little surprise at the end of the episode, something that I wasn't really expecting. Doesn't really push the needle for me too much, but it's a nice homage to the encounter from D1, especially considering that Skolas was brought back in Act 2, only for basically nothing to happen to him. Finally, we had Vesper's Host, although this was not technically a part of the episode, which is why I didn't list it, but rather a part of the Final Shape Dungeon Pass. Regardless, I think this dungeon was fantastic. Some good weapons, some novel boss encounters with updated mechanics, a nice return to the Deep Stone Break-Tech vibes and the setting. Ironic that the best part of the episode was not actually a part of the episode. Check out my full thoughts video for more, but so far, the Dungeon Pass for this year is 1 for 1. The two main exotic weapons for the episode were Eliksni and Slayer's Fang, Eliksni being from the Season Pass. Eliksni's main concept is to generate a lot of special and heavy ammo for you or your team. I don't think I even touched this thing the entire episode. If I really want to be a support character, then sure, I will throw this thing on, I guess. It's very good at what it does. I've just never really felt the need. And Slayer's Fang, the shotgun, does have some neat things going for it. It's definitely better than it is worse, but considering where we are sandbox-wise, you really got to come out swinging to make a huge impression, and this one made an impression. The episodic weapons were not craftable for the first time in ages, and boy did the community really let Bungie know that. The weapons we did get were fine, but nothing that most people couldn't live without, creating this weird dynamic of people being really mad that the weapons weren't craftable, but also people being mad that the weapons weren't that good, unlikely to be crafted in the first place. Bungie did try to have the whole shiny version variant of these weapons as well, dropping with double perks, but the problems were that number 1, the weapons were not very enticing, so nobody cared. 2, the weapons weren't cosmetically different in any way, so nobody cared. And 3, they felt much more rare than getting shiny weapons from Into the Light, so you barely saw them anyway. I think I got maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 the entire episode, and like 3 of them were sidearms. Although I wasn't exactly super active in the areas where these would be dropping, nor did I consume many tonics, which we'll talk about next. I'd be okay with them being super rare drops if I actually wanted them, though. Next episode will continue to have shiny weapons, but with the weapons actually having a visual difference in addition to being adept weapons, apparently. Tonics were one of the main currencies / consumables that were used in this episode, which were almost universally hated, although that's likely in combination with the lack of crafting. I likened them to Season of the Witch's card system, an interesting concept that I just never wanted or needed to really interact with. You crafted tonics with some materials that you would get from a wide range of sources, but some of the rarer materials were from the new activities. You activate a tonic in order to increase the drop chances of certain weapons and or guarantee that you would receive a particular weapon after a certain amount of time, in addition to some combat-related things. There were 2 different ones. But it took 2 acts before Bungie came out and upped the drop rate on tonic weapon drops after complaints that people would go a full hour without actually receiving a drop from that specific tonic. I am still blown away at the fact that chugging a tonic for a certain weapon would not guarantee that weapon to drop. I am blown away that someone at Bungie made this item and thought that people would be okay with not getting drops when using a tonic that said you'll get this drop. Tonics also bolstered certain abilities in the artifact, but you can only do one of these at a time. I pretty much ignored tonics the entire episode outside of just needing to do them for any sort of progression-based things because I never really felt like I needed them, only popping them towards the end to get one weapon that I was maybe sort of looking for. And I ignored the artifact boosting tonics because, again, we are strong enough in the game that I did not want to micromanage my gameplay that closely. I barely remember to change my artifact around when switching between builds in the first place. I am not going to then micromanage my builds for a couple of months to get a 1% benefit from a tonic which will expire after an hour. This should probably be in gameplay, but I'm going to do it here. Ido also had minor and major fieldworks to complete, Episode 2's version of the seasonal challenge boosts that we've gotten in seasons past. Except these were the most mind-numbingly boring things to go do out in the world. The equivalent of just completing some bounties, doing random busy work. And then when you finally got to the major fieldwork was zoning into an area, like you're going to start a new mission, killing 15 enemies, and then listening to people talk for like a minute. I don't know what the hell was going on with this whole system, but literally never do this again. Or if you're gonna, at least make the major fieldwork interesting. This whole fieldwork thing, mechanic in episode 2, terrible. Nothing redeeming about it. The episode artifact was heavily Stasis themed, giving us a Stasis focused season for the first time in, is it ever? It might be ever, with 7 perks dedicated to Stasis. Something I do find myself not caring about are the second and third waves of artifact perks though, especially the third wave. By the time the third wave comes out, I am essentially checked out of the season, having very little desire to experiment with some perks that are going to be gone in a month. Don't get me wrong, I would rather have them than not, but I just find myself not caring about them. And again, since I often try to make build videos that do not use the artifact in case people come across them in the future, I am usually terrible about checking my artifact to even see if I have the right perks equipped. If Bungie is able to bring the artifact into loadouts, that would be huge. And while I'm sure they would maybe like to, I'm guessing this is more of a technical limitation than Bungie outright saying like, no, we don't want to do that to something like this. Festival of the Lost also came and went this year. I was out of town for most of it, but it was another Festival of the Lost. And the same pretty much goes for the Dawning, although at least the Dawning had a couple of good weapons to go grind out if you really wanted them. Really, the biggest thing this episode may be known for is the amount of bugs that the game has experienced over the past 4 to 6 months. As I've said in other videos from this episode, I have very little confidence in reading anything at face value in this game anymore, at least anything new, because there's a decent chance it's not working properly. I have zero confidence in anything that I say anymore because I don't have complete memorization over the countless amounts of things that have launched in a bugged state, or worse, launched not bugged, but so obviously wrong that I really don't know how they launched like that in the first place. Tonics were the main culprit, but another one that really annoyed me was the Kel's Fall mission. From it drops the final currency you needed to make the final batch of tonics, but it only dropped 1 per completion. Not bugged, just stupid. Yes, Bungie fixes a good amount of these problems somewhat quickly, but things like this, the obvious mistake of dropping 1 of a currency for a system that people are already really mad at, does not inspire confidence. It feels like how I feel about the game right now. I'm on autopilot. Episode 2 definitely feels like a low point for the year, even if there was nothing really that bad about it. But it's just another batch of Destiny content. I don't know how many more times I can say it. More Destiny, just more Destiny does not inspire. Just more Destiny doesn't cut it. And that's what this episode was. I'm going into episode 3 with some slightly higher hopes. It will be dealing with characters and settings that are arguably the most popular in the franchise. It will be the transition point between the old story and the new, and historically, the final season in an expansion cycle tends to be either the best of the year or at least better than average. That being said, I'm not expecting much more than more Destiny, though. I'm just expecting to be a little more emotionally invested compared to episodes 1 and 2. I like Misrax. I don't mind Aramis, I don't mind Ido, but they're not the characters I'm really looking forward to seeing the most. Episode 3 should hopefully have something a little more up people's alley. And I also suspect that a good amount of people may return after taking a hefty breather from the game to play all of the content that's come out since the conclusion of the final shape, so maybe player counts bounce back a little bit there too. We got a preview of the episode recently. You can check out that video next if you would like. But my main concern going into episode 3 is that I'm not too sure the more Destiny feedback is going to be really addressed. At the same time, I'm not really expecting it to be addressed anymore, especially when Frontiers is following shortly after with a lot of systems changes coming. It's very obvious that if we are going to get any big changes, any big systematic changes, anything that is beyond just more Destiny, it's probably going to be then. So I'll see you then. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.